Stigmatization within psychiatry and mental health, and how to avoid being a victim of stigmatization in this world in mental health. There is a lot of stigmatization about mental health and psychiatry. This is very much prevalent in third world countries like India or Africa or other places where religion and superstition often plays a greater role. There are much more stigmatization in such places where there are such conditions that are where they have a bad reputation for mental health care services and how to deal with mental health issues in general. But also in Norway, in Canada, United States, in Sweden, etc., there is also stigmatization in society. There is stigmatization because we generally view people that are outside the main circle as different, as psychopaths, as different, as freaks, as outcasts, as something that's accepted from the norm. We view them as different, like they are their own kind, sort of. We are separating ourselves from them, or they are separating themselves from us. And so we have stigmatization because we see them as different. Something to remember within this situation is that Albert Einstein was working outside the known circle. Michelangelo was from outside this circle of his time. Van Gogh was outside the norm of the circle, etc., etc. Most great artists or people within the working with the creativity of their minds, etc., have been outside the main circle, have been working outside from what is seen as normal, what is seen as correct behavior, etc. So when there is stigmatization in society, very often people with mental health issues, people with schizophrenia, people with bipolar, people with any sort of mental health illness will take on this stigmatization, feeling more guilt and pressured and burdened from all these things that they take on as they live live with their illness, as they live with their mental health handicap. And then take on X amount of stigmatization, thinking I'm schizophrenic, I hear voices, and I'm a freak, and I am an outcast, and I am this, and I am that in addition. So there are two things here. There's one, we have the stigmata from the first place, we have stigmatization in society from the first place, and second, we having mental patients or people within psychiatry who take on this stigmatization onto themselves as an extra burden. First, I'd like to address the point of stigmatization in society in general. How do we deal with that? How do we deal with stigmatization in society? How do we get over it? Everybody faces mental challenges during their lifetime. Everybody experiences some sort of psychological damage or challenges or illness of mind or whatever you call it during the lifetime. Everybody. So to create that sort of stigmatization eventually points back at yourself. And I also would like to point a finger at media and to parents and the society in general, saying that the picture you are creating of mentally insane people is not always accurate, meaning that we often get the picture that mental patients are dangerous, they are violent, and so on and so forth, while that is often not the issue. Sometimes that can be correct, yes, but very often that is not what what is the case. And we need to look beyond that, those layers of programming and of society programming and of stigmata. Because if we only pour out stigmata into the society, onto the child, through the TV, what do we get? We get more of what we first had in the first place. We get more stigmatization, we get more illness, we get more psychosis, we get more depression, more danger, etc., etc. So to have stigmatization is really just sabotaging. I repeat, to have stigmatization and to participate in stigmatization is just sabotaging. To have stigmatization in society is sabotage of society and of life in general. So when I or anybody else would walk around in society and live in this world, and it would be very easy for me to take on to myself that sort of stigmatization that I see in this world. It would be very easy for me to just take on lots of guilt and shame and fear and confusion and nervousness and anxiety and depression and anger. All this stigmatization, uh, all this stigmatization in society, I could just put it onto myself like I was shopping groceries. So there is a lot of stigmatization in society, also in the Western world. There is a lot of it. And so how do I avoid taking it onto myself? How do I manage to live my life with my mental illness and without taking on that extra amount of stigmatization? How do I live? How do I live with that? How do I avoid taking on stigmatization? That is a tough call, perhaps, to avoid taking on stigmatization, but it is a call that we need to answer. It is a call where we need to take responsibility, and that is one of the key elements to take responsibility. If I take responsibility for my life and everything that I see around me, that I can deal with, that I can work with, then I would not that easy take on that stigmatization from the newspapers or media, from some sort of something you heard people talk about on the phone, or you heard people talking about in a group at a meeting, etc. If I take responsibility, if I take 100% responsibility for myself, my being, and I act responsible with everything that I do in my life, then I will not that easily take on to myself stigmatization, judging myself for things that don't affect me at all, really. It is easier to prevent stigmatization, to take on stigmatization, if I take responsibility for myself. Also, if we are able to build self-trust, also if we are able to build self-trust, we will not that easily take on stigmatization, and so on and so forth. Self-honesty, self-worth, and so on and so forth. So how do we get to this point of empowerment, of self-trust and self-responsibility and self-honesty? It's a process to be walked. The answer is out there in front on your computer, to learn self-honesty. to learn self-responsibility, to learn self-trust. What is it all about? How does it all work? So we need to unlearn psychology. The ad masses need to learn about psychology because we have psychiatry, because we have psychology. And eventually they must both stop. In the meantime, and to do that, and to get to that stop, we can all learn psychology and unlearn psychology and unlearn psychiatry, prevent people from ending up in psychiatry, in depression, in anxiety, in suicide, etc., etc. So we need to unlearn psychology, embrace and forgive self, and get to the point of self-responsibility, self-trust, self-worth. That is how we end. If we get to a point of self-trust, self-responsibility, self-worth, self-honesty, we will not no longer take onto ourselves those burdens of stigmatization of emotions. So there is stigmatization, but we can avoid taking it on, and we can all participate in sharing the awareness about our mental health by sharing, by vlogging, by blogging, writing video, or making documentaries about ourselves and our experiences, put it out there to make people see that I am schizophrenic, I am bipolar, I have ADHD, and talk to people so we can create awareness and stop stigmatization. Thank you very much for listening.